Good evening. This is the Chevalier, and this is Bedtime Stories for Little People. I intend to read for anyone out there who needs a bedtime story but sadly does not have anyone out there to read for them. But before I begin reading to help you fall asleep and drift off to Nina Nonland, I want to give a moment of self-care reminders. Before you settle in for bed, I hope all of you out there have had a nice healthy snack, washed your face, brushed your teeth, and had a nice glass of water before you lay down to sleep. With that said, I will now begin reading. Tonight I will be reading from the Brothers Grimm Complete Fairy Tale Collection. The first story I shall be reading this evening is The Frog Prince. Long ago, when wishes often came true, there lived a king whose daughters were all handsome, but the youngest was so beautiful she shone like the sun himself, and was bemused every time he shone over her because of her beauty. Near the royal castle there was a great dark wood, and in the wood, under an old linen tree, was a well. And when the day was hot, the king's daughter used to go forth into the wood and sit by the brink of the cool well. And if time seemed long, she would take out a golden ball, throw it up in the air, and catch it again. And this was her favorite little pastime. And now it happened one day that the golden ball, instead of falling back into the little maiden's hands when she sent it aloft, dropped near the ground near the edge of the well, and happened to roll in. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes as it sank down, down the deep well, so deep that the bottom it could not be seen. And she began to weep, and weep, and weep, as if she could never be comforted. And in the midst of her weeping she heard a little voice, saying to her, "What ails you, king's daughter? Your tears would melt the heart of stone." And when she looked to see where the voice came from, there was nothing but a frog stretching his thick ugly head out of the water. "Oh, it is you, old waddler," she said. "I weep because my golden ball has fallen into the well." "Oh, never mind, do not weep," answered the frog. "I can help you. But what will you give if I fetch your ball up again?" "Whatever you would like, dear frog. Any of my clothes, my pearls, my jewels, or even my golden crown that I wear." "Ah, your clothes, your pearls and jewels, and your golden crown are of nothing to me," answered the frog. "But if you were to love me, and have me as your companion and a playfellow, and let me sit by you at the table, and eat from your plate, and drink from your cup, and even sleep in your little bed, if you promise me all this, I will dive down below the water, and I will fetch your golden ball again." "Oh yes," she answered, "I will promise it all, whatever you want, if you only get me my ball again, please." But then she thought to herself, "Oh, what nonsense he talks, as if he could do anything but sit in the water and croak with other frogs, or could possibly be any one of my companions." But the frog, as soon as he heard her promise, drew his head under the water and sank down out of sight. But after a while he came to the surface again, with the ball in his mouth, and he threw it out upon the grass. The king's daughter was overjoyed to see her pretty plaything again, and she caught it up and ran off with it. "Stop, stop!" cried the frog. "Take me with you. I can't run as fast as you can." But it was of no use, for croak and croak after her he might, he could not get her to listen to him, but made it haste home, and very soon forgot all about the poor frog, who had betake himself to the well again. The next day the king's daughter was sitting at a table with the king and all the court, eating from her golden plate, and there came the little pitter-patter up the marble stairs. And then there was a knocking at the door, and the voice crying, "Youngest king's daughter, let me in." And she got up and ran to see who it could be. But when she opened the door, there was the frog sitting outside. And then she shut the door hastily and went back to her seat, feeling very uneasy. The king noticed how quickly her heart was beating, and said, "My child, what are you afraid of? Is there a giant standing out at the door, ready to carry you away?" "Oh no," she said, "no giant, but a horrid, horrid frog." "What does the frog want?" asked the king. "Oh, dear father, when I was sitting by the well yesterday and playing with my golden ball, it fell in the water, and while I was crying for the loss of it, the frog came out and got it for me again, on the condition that he would be my companion. But I never thought that he could leave the water, or come out after me. But now there he is at the door, and he wants to come in and see me." And then all they heard at the knocking at the second time and crying, "Youngest king's daughter, open to me. By the well water, what promised you to me? Youngest king's daughter, now open for me." "Thou which has promised, thou must perform," said the king. "Go on now, and let him in." And so she went and opened the door, and the frog hopped in, following at her heels. Till she approached the chair, he stopped and cried, "Lift me up, I wish to sit by you." But she delayed in doing so, and the king ordered her. When once the frog was on the chair, he wanted to get on the table. And there he sat and said, "Now push your golden plate a little nearer so that I might eat together with you." And so she did, but everybody might see how unwilling she was. And the frog feasted heartily, but every morsel seemed to stick in her throat. "I have had enough now," said the frog at last, "and I am a little tired. Will you please carry me to your room and ready your silken bed so that we might lie down and go to sleep?" But the king's daughter began to weep, and was afraid of the cold frog, that nothing would satisfy him, but he must sleep in her clean bed. And now the king grew angry with her, and said, "That thou wouldst have promised in thy time of necessity, now must perform." And so she picked up the frog with finger and thumb, carried him downstairs, and put him in a corner. And when she laid down to sleep, he came a-creeping up and said, "I am tired, and I wish to sleep as much as you. Please take me up, or I will tell your father." And she felt beside herself with rage. Picking him up, she threw him with all her strength against the wall, now crying, "Now will you be quiet, you horrid, horrid frog?" But as he fell, he ceased to be a frog, became at once a prince with beautiful, kind eyes. And it came to pass, with her father's consent, that they would become bride and bridegroom. But he told her how wicked a witch had bound him by her spells, and how no one but she alone could have released him, and that now they would go together to his father's kingdom, and there would be a door and a carriage drawn by 8 white horses, white plumes on their heads, and golden harnesses. Behind the carriage was standing faithful Henry, a loyal servant of the young prince. Now faithful Henry had suffered such care and pain when his master was turned into a frog, that he was obliged to wear 3 iron bands around his heart to keep it from breaking. And with trouble and anxiety, when the carriage started to take the prince to his kingdom, faithful Henry helped them both in. And when he got up and behind, he was so full of joy by his master's deliverance, that when they had gone to part away, the prince heard a sound at the back of the carriage, as if something had broken, and he turned round. "Henry, the wheel! It must be breaking." But Henry then answered, "The wheel does not break. 'Tis the band around my heart, that to lessen its ache, and when I grieved for your sake, I bound round my heart." And again and yet again there was the same sound, and the prince thought that it must be the wheel breaking. But it was the breaking of the other bands upon Henry's heart, for he was so relieved and happy. Next I shall read The Gallant Tailor. One summer morning, a little tailor was sitting on his bed near the window, and working cheerfully all the night. And when his old woman came down from the street, crying, "Good jelly to sell, good jelly to sell," the cry sounded pleasant in the little tailor's ears, and so he put out his head of the window and cried out, "Hey here, my good woman! Come here if you would like to have a customer." And so the poor woman climbed the steps with her very heavy basket, and was obliged to unpack and display all her pots to the tailor. He looked at every single one of them, lifting the lids, and applied his little nose to each and last. "The jelly seems very good. You may weigh me out 4 half ounces, if I don't mind having 1/4 of a pound." And the woman, who had expected to find a good customer, gave him what he asked for, but went off rather angry and grumbling. "The jelly is a very thing for me," cried the little tailor. "It will give me the strength and cunning." And so he took down the bread from the cupboard, and he cut around the loaf, and spread the jelly very fine, and laid it near him, and went on stitching gladly, more so than ever. And all the while the scent of the sweet jelly was spreading throughout the room, and where there were qualities of flies who attracted by it, and flew to partake. "Now then, who asked you to come by?" said the tailor, and drove the unbidden guests away. But the flies, not understanding the language of man, were not wont to get rid of, and returned in even larger number than before. And the tailor, not being able to stand it any longer, took from his chimney a ragged cloth, and waving it around, saying, "Now I'll let you have it. I'll beat among you all mercifully." And then he ceased and counted the slain. He found that 7 dead flies were laying before him. "This is indeed somewhat," he said, wondering at his own gallantry. "The whole town should know of this." And so he hastened to cut out a belt, and stitched it up, and put it on large capitals, "7 at one blow." The town, I did say, and the little tailor, the whole world shall know it, and his heart quivered with joy like a lamb's tail. The tailor fastened the belt around himself, and began to think of going out into the world, for his workshop seemed too small for his worship. And so he looked about the house for something that would be of use to him. He found nothing but old cheese, which he then put in his pocket. Outside the door he noticed that a bird had been caught in the bushes, and so he took that and put it in his pocket as well with the cheese. And then he set out gallantly on his way, and when he caught light and active he felt no fatigue. He led all his way up to a great mountain, and when he reached the top of the peak, he saw a terrible giant sitting there, looking about him. And at ease the tailor went bravely up to him, and called out and said, "Comrade, good day. There are you sitting over on the wide world. I am on the thinner to seek fortune. Have you a fancy to go with me?" The giant looked at the tailor most contemptuously, and said, "You little rascal! You miserable fellow!" "That may be," answered the little tailor, undoing his coat and sewing the giant his belt. "You can read there whether I am man or not." And the giant read, "7 at one blow," and thinking it meant men that the tailor had killed, felt at once more respect for the little fellow. And then, as he wanted to prove him, he took up a stone and squeezed it so hard that water came out of it. "Now can you do that?" said the giant. "That is a show of great strength." "Oh, that's not much," said the little tailor. "I call that play." And he put his hand in his pocket, and took out the cheese, and he squeezed it, and the whey ran out from it. Well, what do you think of that? The giant didn't know what to say, for he could not have believed it of the little man. And the giant took up a stone and threw it so high in the air it nearly lost sight. "Now, little fellow, what do you think of that?" Well thrown," said the tailor. But the stone fell back to earth again. "I will throw one at you that will never come back." And he felt in his pocket and took out the bird. And when he threw the bird flew into the air. And it took great liberty, and took wing, and flew, and returned no more. What do you think of that, comrade? "There is no doubt that you can throw," said the giant, "but we will see what you can carry." And he led the little tailor to a mighty oak tree, which had been felled and was lying on the ground. "Now, if you are strong enough, help me carry this tree out of the wood." "Willingly," said the little man. "You can take the trunk on your shoulders, and I will take the branches and all the foliages. That is as much as the difficult part." And so the giant took the trunk upon his shoulders, and the tailor seated himself on a branch, and the giant could not see what he was doing, and had the whole tree to carry, and the little man on it as well. And the little man was very cheerful and merry, and whistled a tune. "There were 3 tailors riding by," as if carrying the tree was mere child's play. The giant, when he had struggled, looked under his heavy part of the way, and was tired, and cried, "Look here, I must let go of the tree." The tailor quickly jumped off, taking hold of the tree with both arms, as if he had been carrying it, and said to the giant, "You see, you can't carry the tree as though you thought yourself a big fellow." And when they went on together a little farther, presently they came to a cherry tree, and the giant took hold of the upmost branches, and where the ripest fruit had hung, and pulling them downwards, gave them to the tailor, and said, bidding him to eat. But the little tailor was too much weak to hold the tree, and the giant let go, and the tree sprang back, and the tailor caught up into the air. And when he dropped down again without any damage, the giant said to him, "How is this? Haven't you the strength to hold on to such a sprig as that?" "It is not the strength I am lacking," answered the little tailor. "How should it be that to one who has slain 7 at one blow? I just jumped, and over the tree, and the hunters are shooting down. There, in the bushes, you can jump too, can't you?" The giant made the attempt, but not being able to vault the tree, he remained hanging in the branches, so much so that the little tailor got the better of him, and then said to the giant, "As you are such a gallant fellow, I suppose you shall come to me to our den, and stay the night." The tailor was quite willing, and he followed, and when they reached the den, there they sat by the fire with other giants, and each had roasted a sheep in his hand while eating it. And the little tailor looked about and thought, There's more elbow room here than in my workshop." And the giant showed him a bed, and told him that he had better lie down and go to sleep. The bed was, however, far too big for the tailor, so he did not stay in it, but crept into a corner of it to sleep. And as soon as it was midnight, the giant got up and took a great iron staff to beat the bed with one blow, and he supposed that he had made the end of the grasshopper of the tailor. And very early in the morning, when the giants went into the woods, they all forgot about the little tailor. And when they saw him coming after them, alive and merry, they all thought they were terribly frightened, thinking that he was going to kill them, and so they all ran away in haste. And the little tailor marched on, always following his nose. And after he had gone a great way, he entered a courtyard belonging to the king's palace. There he felt so overpowered with fatigue that he laid down and fell asleep. In the meanwhile came various people, who looked at him carefully, and read his belt, 7 at one blow. "Oh," they thought, "why, this should be a great lord here in time of peace. What a mighty champion he must be!" And then they went and told the king all about him. They thought that if a war should break out, such a worthy man would be useful, and that he was not to be allowed to depart at any price. The king then summoned his council, and set one of his courtiers to the little tailor, and beg, and as soon as he wake up, to consent to come serve in the king's army. And so the messenger stood there at the sleeper's side, until his limbs began to stretch and his eyes open. And then he was carried his answer back, and the answer was, "That was the reason for which I had came, and I am ready to enter the king's service." And so he retrieved into a very honorable and very separate dwelling that was set apart for him. But the rest of the soldiers were very much set against this little idea of the tailor. They wished him 1,000 miles away. "What will be done about it?" they said among themselves. "If we are to pick quarrel and fight, he can take down 7 of us with one blow. That will be no good of us." And so they came to a resolution, and when they all went together to the king to ask for their discharge, "We never intended," they said, "to serve with a man who can kill 7 in one blow." The king felt very sorry to lose all his faithful servants, because one man he wished he had never even wished that he had never even seen him, would doubtlessly rid himself if he might. But he did not dare dismiss the little tailor for fear that he would kill all the king's people and place himself upon the throne. He thought for a great while about it, and at last made up his mind what to do. He sent for the little tailor and told him that he was so great a warrior that he proposed to make him. He told him that in the wood in his dominions dwell 2 giants who did great damage and robbery, murder and fire, and that no man durst go near them for fear of his life, but that if the little tailor should overcome and slay both of these giants, the king would give him his only daughter in marriage, and half his kingdom as a dowry, and that 100 horsemen would go with him and give him assistance. "That would be something for a man like me," thought the little tailor, "a beautiful princess and half a kingdom. Those are not you don't come by that every day." And so he said to the king, "Oh yes, I can soon overcome the giants, and yet have no need of the 100 horsemen. He who can kill 7 in one blow has no need to be afraid of only 2. And so the little tailor set out, and the 100 horsemen followed him. And when he came to the border, and he said to his escort, "Stay here while I go attack the giants alone." And then he sprang into the wood, and looked upon his right and his left. And after a while he caught sight of the 2 giants. They were lying down, caught under a tree asleep, snoring so that all the branches shook. And the little tailor, all alive, filled both his pockets with stones, and climbed up into the tree, and made his way to an overhanging branch, so that he could seat himself above the sleepers. And from there he let one stone after another fall upon the chest of one of the giants. For quite some time the giant was unaware of this, and at least he waked up and pushed to his comrade and said, "What are you hitting me for?" "Ah, you're dreaming," said the other. "I am not touching you." And so they compressed themselves to sleep again, and the little tailor once again let fall a stone upon the other giant. "What can that be?" he said. "Why are you casting at me?" "I ain't casting nothing at you," grumbled the first. And they disputed for a while, and as they were tired, they gave it all up at last, and their eyes closed once more. And the little tailor began the game anew, picked out an even heavier stone, and threw it down with great force upon the first giant. "This is too much," he cried, and he sprang up like a madman, and struck his companion with a blow. And the tree shook above them, and the other paid him back ready in coin, and they fought with such fury that they tore up the trees by the root for weapons against each other, and so at last they both laid them dead upon the ground, and now the little tailor got down. "Huh, another piece of luck," he said. "That tree that I was sitting in did not get torn up, too, or else I would have been jumping like squirrel from one tree to another." He drew his sword and gave end to the giants in a few hacks in the breast, and then went back down to the horsemen and said, "The deed is done. I have made an end of both of them. But it went so hard with me that in the struggle they uprooted the trees to defend themselves. But it was of no use, for they had to do with a man that can kill 7 in one blow." "Then are you not wounded?" said one of the horsemen. "Nothing of the sort," said the tailor. "I have not turned a hair." The horsemen would still not believe it, and rode up into the wood to see, and there they found the giants wallowing in blood, and all the while about them the uprooted trees. The little tailor then claimed the promised boon, but the king repented him of the offer, and sought again on how to rid the hero. "Before you can possess my daughter and half the kingdom," he said to the tailor, "you must perform another heroic act. In the wood there is a unicorn who does great damage. You must secure him." "A unicorn does not strike more terror in me than two giants. 7 at one blow? That is my way," said the tailor's answer. And so, taking rope and axe with him, he went into the wood, and told those who ordered him to attend him to wait outside. He would not far seek the unicorn, soon came out and sprang at him, and he would make an end of him with his life without delay. "Softly, softly," he said, "most haste, worse speed," and remained standing until the animal came quite near, and then he slipped quietly behind a tree. The unicorn ran with all his might against the tree, but got his horn so stuck deep into the trunk that he could not get it out again. "Now I have you," said the tailor. Coming out from behind the tree, putting rope around the unicorn's neck, he took an axe and set free the horn. And when the party was assembled, he led forth the animal and brought it to the king. The king did not wish yet to give the promised reward, and so set about a third task. Before the wedding could take place, the tailor was to secure a wild boar, which had also done great damage in the wood nearby. The huntsmen were to accompany him. "All right," said the tailor, "this is child's play." But he did not take the huntsmen with him to the wood. They were all for the better pleased, for the wild boar had many times before received them in such a way that they did not fancy to disturb him. And when the boar caught sight of the tailor, he ran at him, foaming at mouth and gleaming tusks, to bear him to the ground. But the nimble hero rushed to the chapel with a chance to be near, and jumped quickly from a window to the other side, and the boar ran after him. And when he got inside, he shut the door after him, and there he was imprisoned, for the creature was too big and unwieldy to jump out the window. And when the tailor called for the huntsmen, so that they might see the prisoner with their own eyes, he betook himself to the king, and now whether he liked it or not, was obliged to fulfill his promise, and give him his daughter and half the kingdom. But if he had known that the great warrior was only a little tailor, he would not have taken him any more to heart. And so the wedding was celebrated with great splendor and joy, and the tailor was made into a king. One night the young queen heard her husband talking to his sheep, and talking in his sleep, saying, "Now, boy, makes me a waistcoat, and patch me those breeches, or I will lay my yard and measure about your shoulders." And so she perceived out of low birth her husband really had been, and went to her father in the morning, and told him all, and begged him to set him free, because he was nothing more than just a tailor. The king bade her comfort in saying, "Tonight leave your bedroom door open. My guards shall stand outside, and when he is asleep, they shall come in and bind him and carry him off to a ship, so that he will be sent to the other side of the world." And so the wife felt consoled. But the king's water bearer, who had been listening all the while, went to the little tailor and disclosed the plan. "Oh, I will put a stop to that," he said. And at night he lay down in his usual bed, and when his wife thought that he was asleep, she got up and opened the door to lay down again. But the tailor, who had only been making believe to be asleep, became a mummers plainly. "Now, boy, take me that waistcoat and patch me those breeches, or I will lay my yard about your shoulders. I have slain 7 at one blow, killed 2 giants, caught a unicorn, and taken a wild boar. What should you be afraid of? Shall I be afraid of those who are standing outside my door?" And when they heard the tailor say all this, they froze in great fear, and they fled from him as if they had been wild hares, and none of them would ever venture to attack. And so the little tailor ended up remaining a king for the rest of his life. I hope by now all you little ones out there are snoozing peacefully. I wish you all great dreams and great visions dancing through your heads, and I hope you awaken feeling well rested and happy. With this, I say good night to you.